Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2015 movie titled Run All Night starring Liam Neeson. Please be advised that there might be spoilers ahead. The movie opens in the woods, with a man named Jimmy Conlon lying on the ground dying. He describes how he regrets living a life full of deception and disappointing his loved ones. The scene shifts 16 hours earlier as Jimmy awakes in a pub and goes to the owner's office. Danny is laughing with two cops before handing over the bribe money. Jimmy approaches Danny after the cops have left, claiming that his father instructed him to borrow money from him. Danny snarkily agrees, but only if Jimmy volunteers to be Santa for their Christmas party, which Jimmy reluctantly accepts. Later, Danny meets his father and Jimmy's former boss, Irish gangster Lord Sean Maguire. Danny connects him to three Albanian heroin traffickers seeking security and safe transit for their products. Sean refuses to work with them, claiming that his days as a mobster are past and that he now only operates legitimate businesses. As a result of Danny's reluctance, the Albanians demand that he return the money they offered him to negotiate a deal with Sean. They threaten to kill Danny if he does not return the money by tomorrow, but he promises to persuade his father to accept the deal. Later, at Maguire's Christmas party, Jimmy, an alcoholic, behaves inappropriately in front of the families while drunk. Sean checks up on Jimmy's condition because he is his soul buddy and the last person in the world who cares about the ex-hitman. Jimmy admits to losing sleep and drowning himself in drink to alleviate the guilt of killing so many people while working with Sean. Jimmy's son, Michael Conlon, is practicing boxing at a gym. Michael is a retired professional boxer who now helps some younger kids practice boxing at his gym. He works as a limousine driver for his wife Gabby and their two daughters, but he has a bad relationship with Jimmy and does not want to see his father. That night, his clients are Albanian mobsters who come to Danny's house for money. Michael is supposed to sit in the car and wait for them, but he runs into one of the young people he's been assisting in the gym, whom he calls Legs. Legs requests to enter the car so that he can shoot pictures in a limo, and Danny eventually agrees. Meanwhile, inside Danny's home, the Albanians confront Danny, who is high on narcotics. He delivers their money in a duffel bag, but it turns out to be counterfeit Monopoly money. The Albanian boss becomes enraged before Danny pulls out a gun and shoots him without hesitation. He shoots the other Albanian, but he runs out onto the street. Legs, who is recording on his phone, notices Danny's pursuit and calls out Michael. After Danny shoots the guy, Michael urges Legs to hide beneath the rear seat while he starts his car. Unfortunately, Danny spots him and smashes his window before he can flee, but he tries to reason with Danny, explaining that he is Jimmy's son and that they have known each other since they were children. This does not prevent Danny from dragging Michael away from his vehicle and towards the house. Inside, Michael fights and escapes through the back door. Danny pursues him but eventually loses his trail on the street. Danny's friend approaches him and shows him Michael's wallet, which he had left in his jacket. The two decide to go to his residence, which is indicated on his ID card. Sean calls Jimmy at his house to inquire about Michael's contact with Danny. He instantly takes the gun he had hidden in the kitchen and heads to Michael's home. Michael arrives at his house and calls Gabby, instructing her not to return from her brothers until he thinks it's safe. Minutes later, there's a knock on the door, but it's Jimmy, whom Michael hesitantly allows in. Jimmy tells his son that Sean would prefer that Michael not report the incident to the police in order to protect himself and his family. They talk about Michael's reluctance to visit Jimmy because he believes his father is garbage for being a hitman, and Jimmy's decision to see him now is because Sean ordered it. Jimmy informs him that Sean is willing to pay a big fee for his participation. However, Michael appears to reject the concept. Sean advises his son not to do anything rash until he hears back from Jimmy. Danny accepts his requirements, but has already arrived at Michael's house. He plans to kill Michael despite his father's orders. As Jimmy departs, Danny enters Michael's home through the back door. On his way out, he notices Danny's car outside and quickly turns around. Inside, Michael meets Danny, who is going to shoot him, but Jimmy shoots him first, allowing his friend to escape. Michael is astonished and wants to call the police. Jimmy contacts Sean and informs him that he killed Danny for attempting to shoot Michael. They come to the conclusion that Sean will seek vengeance, and that their friendship has ended. After the call, Jimmy warns Michael not to contact the police, so Michael pushes him out of the house before dialing 911. He says his father killed a man in self-defense. Shortly after, 2 cops arrive at his house. The police, who are on Sean's payroll, begin to apprehend Michael. Outside the house, Jimmy sits in his car, watching. He follows the police's car, which is reporting that Michael killed Danny and fled, assuming that they intend to transport him somewhere else while framing him for the murder. Eventually, one of Sean's men approaches the police car and asks the policeman to follow him. When they're about to arrive at their location, the officers are hit by Jimmy's car, resulting in a dramatic car pursuit. They ram and shoot each other's cars until the officers lose control and crash into a store. Jimmy approaches the car and gets his son out of the back seat, while Michael snatches one of the officers' pistols from the ground. As the two flee, one of the officers appears and begins shooting at them. Michael wants to shoot back, but Jimmy stops him and kills the officer. As more officers and Sean's men chase them, the father and boy flee through heavy traffic and into a train station. Sean's men apprehend Jimmy and engage in a fight, while Michael retreats to the platform and boards a train. Jimmy ends up attacking Frank, whom he saw earlier at the Christmas party, and strangles him to death. Michael's train is about to depart when he sees Jimmy and tugs him aboard. During the ride, Jimmy describes how Sean would gather his men and make certain that they ripped Michael's life apart. Sean had instructed his guys to place the Albanian mobsters' bodies in Michael's limo, ensuring that the cops found them. Jimmy informs Michael that the good cops will not help him since they killed a fellow cop, and Michael is Jimmy's son, a hitman they have been trying to pursue for years. Jimmy urges Michael to let his father help him out for one night, and he assures him that Michael will never have to see him again. Meanwhile, Sean is interrogating Danny's best friend, who managed to flee from Jimmy. He cuddles the grieving guy before stabbing him in the back, killing him. Jimmy and Michael exit the train and proceed into a parking lot, where Jimmy breaks into a car with just a shoelace. He asks Michael to visit his brother-in-law and ensure his family's safety. Jimmy intends to talk to Sean and strike a deal, so he instructs Michael to sit tight until he calls him again. Gabby is sleeping at her brother's house when her brother Ricky wakes her up with the news that Michael and Jimmy are on the run. Not long after, Michael arrives at the house, only to be confronted by Gabby and Rick. He briefly explains the problem and asks his wife to trust him to clean up the mess. Soon after, they hear someone knocking on the front door. Michael instructs Ricky to pretend he hasn't seen him or his family before he and Gabby rush to their daughter's bedroom. They tell their children that they will play hide-and-seek while Sean's guys search Ricky's residence. Ricky swears that he hasn't seen Michael or his family, despite not having time to wipe away any evidence of their presence earlier. One interrogates Ricky while the other searches the rooms for the family hiding in a bathtub. Fortunately, they get a call to go somewhere else and leave the house. Back at the scene of the officer's killing, Detective John Harding is leading the investigation when his partner, Detective Oscar Torres, informs him that Danny has been discovered dead in Michael's house and that he has reported that his father is the killer. Jimmy calls John and asks for his help in clearing Michael's name because he is the only cop Jimmy can trust. In exchange, Jimmy will prove that his son did not kill all of these individuals, agree to surrender himself in for the killings of the 2 cops, and provide John with a list of people he has killed during his hitman career. John agrees to let Michael explain himself, but Jimmy claims he needs more time to clean up the damage before turning himself in. Jimmy then takes a taxi to a city restaurant, where he meets Sean. He apologizes for killing Danny and begs Sean to spare Michael's life because he was not the one who pulled the trigger. Jimmy threatens to inform the authorities about Sean's misdeeds as a mafia boss and the victims he ordered him to murder, but Sean is unconcerned because he has a lot of officers on his payroll. He tells Jimmy that he will do everything to kill Michael so that Jimmy may understand how empty his life would be without his son, just like Sean and his wife are right now. Jimmy, convinced that the conversation is done, waits until the hockey game is over before leaving the restaurant, leveraging the crowd to leave. He goes to Ricky's house and tells Michael to take his family to a quiet cabin in the woods, which he used to visit as a child. Michael gives Ricky the directions, and he drives Gabby and the kids to the cottage without him. Jimmy thinks Michael should have left with them for safety, but Michael wants to help. He wants to see Legs, who can prove his innocence because he had witnessed everything. The two walk towards Legs' neighborhood. On the way, Jimmy tells how he had to abandon Michael and his mother to protect them. Meanwhile, Sean discovers his son's body in the mortuary and hires a hitman named Andrew Price to kill Jimmy. He gives him 24 hours to do it and offers to pay double. Andrew visits Jimmy's house and learns about the cabin from an old photograph. Jimmy and Michael tried to find Legs' unit by asking his neighbors. One of them recognizes them and calls 911, forcing officers to arrive and evacuate the premises in an attempt to locate them. When they notice the cops are approaching, Michael informs Legs' brother that he requires Legs' assistance. Andrew hears the news on his police scanner and rushes there too, turning off the building's power. Michael and Jimmy use the outage to blend in with the evacuating crowd, but Andrew can still see them through his night vision goggles. After evading Andrew's gunfire, Jimmy urges Michael to flee while he deals with Andrew. He draws Andrew towards himself, and the two start fighting. Michael resolves to return and aid his father. He points a gun at Andrew, but Jimmy warns him not to squeeze the trigger, and they escape from the balcony without killing him. Detective John observes the two and discovers that someone is shooting at them. Michael and Jimmy manage to get away from the cops and go to Jimmy's brother Eddie's house. Michael helps Jimmy dress his wound while Eddie inquires as to what is going on. Eddie believes that Jimmy is planning to hand Michael over to Sean, as Jimmy has already killed his own cousin to prevent him from speaking with the police. After learning about it, Michael is furious and goes to the cottage alone. Jimmy chooses to see his mother in the hospital before confronting Sean. He contacts Sean to give him one more chance to stop searching for Michael, but Sean refuses. As Jimmy enters Sean's pub, he informs him that he intends to kill him. He kills every one of Sean's soldiers. The two shoot at each other until Jimmy shoots his former best friend and holds Sean in his arms as he dies. Legs pays Detective John a visit in the morning and delivers him the video of Danny killing the Albanian. He also receives a call from Jimmy wishing to turn himself in. Meanwhile, Jimmy is on his way to the cottage with a list of his previous victims' identities. When Michael comes, he notifies Jimmy that the cops are on their way and asks him to go, but Jimmy is too elderly to run and prefers to wait for them. He urges his son not to worry about Sean, and Gabby finally introduces herself and her daughters to Jimmy. Knowing that his father plans to turn himself in, to prevent the children from witnessing his arrest, Michael and his family head to the lake. While he smiles at his family, Andrew, seemingly still in pursuit of him, fires a bullet. Michael instructs his family to run while he goes to help his father. Jimmy takes a shotgun from the home and engages in a shootout with Andrew in the woods, but is shot. There is another gunfight while Jimmy lies down because Michael is looking for Andrew, who is after his daughters. Jimmy uses his remaining power to kill Andrew, just as he is ready to shoot Michael. Michael runs to his dying father before John arrives, and he discovers Jimmy dead with a list of names in his hand. After everything, Michael resumes his normal life as a boxing coach who works hard for his family. Before going to work, Michael takes a moment to glance at a photo of himself and Jimmy in front of the cabin. Thanks for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more of these recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.